Having said that, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lee, and I'm an alcoholic, and I'm visiting you all this afternoon from Washington, D.C. I am a member of the Cosmopolitan Group of Alcoholics Anonymous with a sobriety date of March the 5th, 1976. And ladies and gentlemen, from that day to this, I have not only not had a drink, I have not wanted one. And that is the beginning of the miracle in my life, in this life called recovery. Now, let me see if I can set the tone that might be helpful, specifically to the people who identify themselves as being new. Now, I want you to visualize this with me. Have you ever seen a cake mix box? Now, pay attention to this. When you look at a cake mix box, what you see on the front is the finished product of how good the cake looks. And on the back is the recipe of what you need to do to get what's on the front. Y'all get that? Ladies and gentlemen, that is what Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me. They gave me living proof of what people look like, how people live by not drinking and being a part of this fellowship and embracing this program. Now, mind you, it took years for me to understand that. My drinking, nothing particularly exciting about it. I was 15 years old when I started, not because I wanted to drink or was anything wrong with my family, but I was with some guys that was drinking. And they asked me to join them, and I said, no, I didn't want that. And then a little bit later, they asked me again, and I said, no, I didn't want any. And one of the guys in the group, his name is Dennis, and Dennis wanted to know why I wasn't drinking. I said, because I didn't want any. He said, well, you sure? Because you ain't a punk, are you? And ladies and gentlemen, when he said that, something in my brain and my gut, that combination said, Lee, to show them you ain't a punk, go ahead and drink. And I started to drink with them, and I got drunk. And what that did, that woke up in me, and I'm saying woke up because I didn't know it at the time, but that woke up the obsession to want to drink again. And ladies and gentlemen, I started to look forward to the next time I was going to drink. Now, don't forget, I was 15 years old, but something happened to me that day that changed me. And for the next 15 years of my life, I found myself wanting to drink anything with anybody, anywhere. That included high school, that included the Navy, that included Vietnam, that included the post office. It didn't matter. And it seemed to me in reflection that I kept meeting people that wanted to drink. and then I met a small crew that wanted to drink like me. Now, here is something that I just realized recently. Now, don't forget now, I kept meeting people that drank, and I kept meeting people that drank like me. And this last stage of my drinking, I'm not sure what period of time it covers, but I do remember one of the guys in the group, he said one day, he said one day, they were talking about mixed drinks. And he said, man, we don't deal with no mixed drink. Mixed drinks is for women. We don't deal with no mixed drinks. And he took the top off. It was either a fifth or a quart, and he threw it out the window. And I said, well, what you throw the top away for? He said, we don't need no top. We're going to drink it till it's gone. And I picked that up, and I somehow thought that was cool. That's kind of how my life evolved with drinking. Now, I told you once I started, I look forward to it. I have since learned from you all that's called obsession, looking forward to it, figured out where I was going to drink, who I was going to drink, what kind of lie I was going to tell, what kind of stealing I had to do from my parents. And then there's this thing called obsession. And you all have showed me, Lee, obsession means once you start, you don't want to stop until either you're drunk, passed out, or it's all gone. I didn't know about that. I knew I liked it. I liked the people I drank with for the most part, so I didn't see anything wrong with it because every time I got in trouble, trouble with my parents, trouble at school, trouble with the police, anytime I got in trouble, I would talk to the people I drank with, and they reassured me that it was something wrong with them. And I'm young and I'm growing. I kept feeding into it, and it turned into a way of life. Well, lo and behold, ladies and gentlemen, after I got back from Vietnam, I got a job with the post office. And it wasn't very long before, again, I kept meeting people that drank, meeting people that drank like me. Well, I was fortunate enough to have met a lady who knew a guy that got sober. She saw what you all did for him. And she, like a lot of people in my life that didn't drink, she thought that I could use some help, that I needed some help. And she asked him to help me. And what he agreed to do on Saturday, March the 5th, 1976, he introduced me to the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous by taking me to my first meeting. Now, by now, I'm 30 years old. I looked around the room. I didn't see anybody I knew. I sat there and I listened to them people talk, and I didn't hear anything that made any sense. But I've not had a drink since that morning. On the way home, he asked me, he said, "Well, son, what do you think about the meeting?" And I really didn't know what to say. But I do remember asking him, "How often do you come over here?" He said, "I'm over here every Saturday, Monday, and Wednesday." I said, "Well, can I come back with you Monday?" He said, "No." He said, "I've shown you where it's at. If you want it, you go back and get it yourself." Ladies and gentlemen, I never had a desire to stop drinking, never wished for it, prayed for it, had no intention on ever not drinking. But something changed in me that day. And since I've been here, you all have told me, Lee, I get tickled because it makes sense to me now. You all, in your own kind of way, you all said, "Lee, there is but one that has all power, and that one has chosen you to have this way of life." Ladies and gentlemen, I didn't know it was a way of life. I just thought it was a don't drink behavior. I have been a loyal, what I consider to be a loyal, committed member of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous since that Saturday morning. And I convinced myself that Alcoholics Anonymous was about don't drink and go to meetings. And I've been doing that. And I've been doing it very well. No, I'm one of them people that never had no old idea that I'd ever go back to drinking safely. When I hear people say that, I wonder, well, what does safely mean? I've never kind of figured out drinking safely. I don't understand, why would you want to drink if you don't want to get drunk? It just doesn't make sense to me. But it didn't matter. But I'm coming to these meetings. Now, the gentleman that brought me, and I didn't realize this, he became my sponsor, not because I asked him. He became my sponsor because I claimed him. When I was coming to these meetings and I would hear you all talk about sponsors, I wasn't sure what it was, but anybody asked me did I have one, I said, "Yeah, John." And John was the gentleman that brought me to y'all. He's the one that told me he wasn't going to deal with me anymore about taking me to meetings. But I claimed him, and claimed him means if you ask me did I have a sponsor, I said, "Yeah, John." We work for the same agency, so that benefited me where I got to go talk with him about what my experience was of coming to meetings. And he was talking to me about this book. He said, "Son, there's a book full of information, and the book has the information on the people that created the program of recovery." You remember in the beginning I talked about the cake bricks. On the front is the pretty picture of the cake, and on the back is the directions of how you get what's on the front. Well, he started to tell me about this book, and he said, in the book, the people that created the program, y'all might want to write this down. He said they figured out the solution to alcoholism. They figured it out. They didn't figure out the solution to drinking. You either drink or you don't drink. But they figured out that the reason people like you, Lee, can leave drinking alone by yourself, Lee, is because of this condition called alcoholism. And it said, Lee, it's not in the bottle, it's in your head. I had no idea what the devil they was talking about, but he kept talking about this book. He kept talking about this book. Now listen, he talking about the book and y'all talking about a program. He talking about a book, y'all talking about a program. I'm not interested in either one. Ladies and gentlemen, I had convinced myself that don't drink and go to meetings. It did some wonderful things for me. It stopped me from tearing up cars. I haven't been in a car accident since I've been sober. I have not been arrested since I've been sober. I've not been broke since I've been sober. There are some marvelous things that have happened. I got married sober. I had children sober. All of these external things, these material things, were happening to me in my life. I started to develop the different relationships, but something was missing. And I couldn't put my hand on what was missing. So I bought into this idea that I don't drink, go to meetings. And when things don't go the way I think they should, I started to feel this thing called self-righteousness. And if I wasn't self-righteous about me being right and you being wrong, then I was wallowing in self-pity. The idea that I'm trying to be a better person and still things ain't going my way. So I was just messed up, but I wasn't drinking. And that's what he told me. Listen to this. He said, son, when you stop drinking, you stop having a drinking problem. Well, if I don't drink and I go to meetings, what's the problem? He said, the problem is alcoholism, and the solution is Alcoholics Anonymous. Again, back then it made no sense to me at all, but I kept coming and I kept watching y'all, and he kept talking about this book, and y'all kept talking about this program. Ladies and gentlemen, when I think I've understood something, that I've heard, something that I've read, I call it a spiritual awakening. Being in the presence of an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, being with AA people, I call it a spiritual experience. And I get to call it that because it's how I understand it. So if you're listening and you don't quite get what I'm saying, that just means that you ain't got it yet. But if you stay with us, you're going to get it your way as you understand it. And that's the real benefit of AA. It gives me all of the opportunities I need to keep growing along spiritual lines. So here I am now. I done got the rhythm. Don't drink, go to meetings. Got a car, got a cab. Oh, got clothes, got money. Oh, things couldn't be better. And I was enjoying fault and blame because I was doing all of the right things. How come I couldn't have my way? And it didn't matter because if I could blame you, if I could make it your fault while things weren't working the way I thought they should, then I felt good about that. That's really what self-righteous means. Not having any empathy for anybody, just obsessed. The obsession to drink has been replaced with the obsession to have my way. And I couldn't see the impact that it was having on other people because I'm too selfish. And I didn't get any of this for years, ladies and gentlemen. It's important, please understand, I've been in AA over 30 years before any of what I'm saying made sense to me. But that's why in our literature, in particular, how it works, they said, for new people, we beg you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. They didn't beg you to go to meetings. Well, what is it they're fearless and thorough about? What? About giving yourself to this simple program. And y'all been telling me about this program since day one. My sponsor been telling me about this book since day one. And it took years for it to click, that spiritual awakening. So that's what they're talking about. They're not talking about clothes and sex and money and jewelry. They're talking about spiritual growth. I had no idea what that meant. And because I'm so rooted in selfishness, I really wasn't interested in learning. But then, and I had a but then, something in me changed. And what changed was my attitude about wanting to learn, not about knowing, but about wanting to learn. So you all said that there's a program of recovery.
That's not.
They said, Lee, you don't recover from drinking. You detox. You recover from alcoholism, and it's a process. You keep working yourself through it. And the people that created this program, they figured out how to do it. And the amazing thing, and if you've not considered this, I would encourage you to do so. The amazing thing is that not only did they figure it out, but once they figured it out, they tested it among themselves. And once they were absolutely sure that they did it and it worked, they wrote it down. That's the program we talk about. They wrote it down. And that's what my sponsor told me, son, they got it. he said, he said, not only did they write it down, he said, Lee, they put numbers by them just for you. So you don't have to get confused. You don't have to get confused, son. You know what a one is, don't you? Start with number one. So when I started to read these things, it just didn't make any sense to me. But I started, and I'm coming there and I'm watching y'all, and I'm listening to you, and slowly but surely, don't confuse time with effort. There are some people in AA that say give time time, and I don't think that makes sense to me. I think I benefit from my effort to my willingness to want to learn, my effort, my willingness to want to learn, doing something with my time other than sitting and just go to the meetings like I used to. I just go to the meetings and sit there and wait till the time was up and leave because I was satisfied, don't drink, because I was told that drinking was the problem until I got to y'all. And y'all said, no, drinking ain't the problem. The problem is alcoholism. Drinking is what kept you drunk. Alcoholism is what kept you drinking. Yeah, y'all might want to write what the you want to write that down? Let me run that by you again. Drinking is what kept me drunk. Alcoholism is what kept me drinking. Alcoholics Anonymous is what keeps me sober and balanced and enjoying my life and the people in it. So I started to try to figure out and understand this program of recovery. Now, when them early folk, and I can't help but tell you, when I say early, our literature talks about there's a book written by a gentleman who was an early member and a historian. He talks about how them early people in Akron, New York, and Cleveland, among themselves, they figured out what the solution was, and they did it in 2.5 years. Just think about that. AA's history said Bill and Bob met our anniversary. Our birthday is June 10th, 1935. They figured out the solution to alcoholism and published a book in 1939. Let that settle on you. Well, what in the world? What did they do? How did they do it? Why did they do it? And if you stay in AA long enough, you're going to hear us talk about God. There we are. Not to be offensive to anyone. Don't confuse religion and church, because that's not what we're talking about. And if, in fact, anybody on this platform today, if you are affiliated with any religion, by all means, according to AA's literature, by all means, stay involved, stay committed. Just don't confuse what they do with what we do. And what we do is help people get sober. We help people have a better life. We help people grow along spiritual lines. And that's what this literature talks about. So, ladies and gentlemen, when I was brought here, I didn't admit I was powerless over alcohol. And the reason I didn't admit it is I didn't understand what it meant. My life was unmanageable. I couldn't figure out, well, what do you mean unmanageable? I had a job, had a car, had a woman, and I lived home with my mama. So I thought my life was in place. Plus, I was getting drunk all the time. So I just couldn't make the connection with the first step. But the second step clicked in me immediately. And what happened at that very first meeting, I saw people that looked different than the people I drank with. I didn't think you looked better, but clearly you looked different. And the difference was is you didn't look like them people I drank with. And that was an immediate sense of awareness for me. I didn't know to call it anything but that. I didn't even know to call it that I was attracted to it. But something happened, and I went back to that meeting that following Monday. And I went back to work with them people I'd been drinking with. And it became more and more obvious to me that there's a difference between the people that come to these meetings and the people that continue to come versus the people that drink and the people that continue to drink. And the idea wasn't to judge one against the other. It was just simply to recognize it and to be open and honest about it. And clearly that impacted me then and now, how different we look, how different we talk, and the impact that it eventually had. Because, ladies and gentlemen, it never occurred to me the power of influence of the people that I hung around with and the people that I listened to. Let me run that by y'all again. Pay attention to the people that you hang with and the people that you listen to and see what kind of impact, if any, does it have on your life. And I realized that from you all, just how different you look. I didn't understand what you were talking about, but I knew that something about y'all looked different. So I can't tell you how long it took me, but it did occur to me. I was sitting in a club here in D.C. called the Metropolis Club one Sunday morning. And back then, ladies and gentlemen, I used to drink coffee and smoke cigarettes. I don't do either anymore. Well, I have my coffee with my meditation, but I don't smoke cigarettes anymore. But anyway, I'm sitting in a meeting that Sunday morning. I'm listening to people talk. It's a cloud of smoke. And I just was hearing voices. I wasn't listening, but I was hearing voices. And I heard a voice in my head. And the voice said very clearly, just like you all can hear me, ladies and gentlemen, I heard that voice. The voice said, Lee, voice called me by name. The voice said, Lee, stay with these people. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what I consider to be my third step. I decided, now I'd been coming to meetings all along, but at that time, that day, that experience, it was almost like I began to understand what it meant to be committed, and I committed myself to the fellowship. Now again, let me remind you that the fellowship are the men and women that show up to the meetings. This idea of being fearless and thorough, when you all would say those words, I had no idea what they meant. And again, for years I wasn't interested, but I finally got there. I finally got to being interested. Finally got to being willing. And what it's asked of me is, Lee, look at your life. Look at it in totality, not just the drinking, but all of your life. And what do you see? And whatever you see, write it down. Now I understand it different than the first time. The first time I thought being fearless and thorough, I thought I was supposed to write about my drinking. And that's what I did. I wrote about tearing up them cars and stealing and how I treated my family, all of that. That's what I wrote because I thought that's what it meant. Again, follow me. That's what I thought. See, the difference between then and now is what I understand to be spiritual growth. I think differently now. But at that time, so after I wrote it, called these guys that I claimed, I called the one named Paul, and I asked could I take my fifth step with him. Now, fifth step says very clearly that we admitted to ourselves, to God, and to another human being. I thought it said you're supposed to tell somebody what you wrote in your fourth step. That's how I interpreted it. So I called Paul, asked him for a meeting, and he said sure, and we met. And I read to him what I wrote. And I don't remember how much, or I don't remember much of what he said, but I do remember my effort. Because in my head, I think I'm doing what the program of recovery calls for. That's what I think. So I'm better about my effort, but I don't feel better spiritually or emotionally. I'm still tangled up with a whole bunch of stuff that I had no idea was inside of me. The level of my grief and my guilt about how I treated people, the things I had done, especially to the people that were closest to me and loved me the most. But now that the fifth step, I had done it, I thought I had done it anyway. The sixth step says, excuse me, sixth step says, we're entirely ready, entirely ready. Now, I done talked to my sponsor, and I'm trying to do what the program asks. And when I went to the sixth step, I didn't go to Paul, I went back to John. And I'm telling him, again, what I think this program is called for. And he looked at me and he said, well, you ready to do anything about it? And I said, yeah. He said, well, okay, then you're ready for the seventh step. Now, if you know what the sixth step says we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects. Entirely ready, not half-ass, entirely ready. And though I read it, I didn't understand it, I didn't believe it, and that was not my intent. I just thought I was ready to talk about fifth step. So he said, well, if you think you're ready, then you're ready for the seventh step. So I told him, I had talked to him about my fifth step. And he said, well, why are you talking to me about it? I said, well, you're my sponsor. I thought that's what I was supposed to do. He said, son, is that what the step says do? No, then why don't you do what the step says? I said, but I'm talking to you. He said, yeah, Lee, but I'm not the one that has all power. The step says that you humbly ask God. I don't know that I absolutely believed in God at that time, ladies and gentlemen. I believed in the fellowship. I believed that there was something somewhere that's keeping me sober, but I don't know that I believed in God at that time. And I wasn't all that particular about it. So I kind of went through the motions. I just kind of did whatever it is I could do to get through. I wasn't trying to grow along spiritual lines. So anyway, I'm saying all that to say that it's taken me a lot of effort, not a lot of time, a lot of effort. Once I became willing, I maintain that you can't get the results. You can do the work, but if you ain't willing, then you really don't get the same results that the program offers. Now, you can get the results that you create, all right? But the program is different. And I would encourage you to go back and ask yourself, what did them people do that enabled them to be able to write down? If you never tried this, read the foreword to the first edition of Alcoholics Anonymous. And in the first couple of paragraphs, what they say is, says we of Alcoholics Anonymous, we're about 100 folk, and we found the solution to alcoholism. Now listen to this carefully, to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of the book. Didn't say nothing about going to meetings. Didn't say nothing about not drinking. They wrote a book full of information that solves the dilemma of alcoholism. And I finally got it like, wow. So that's where I've been missing it. I keep hanging around with this don't drink idea. Ladies and gentlemen, drinking has nothing to do with my life. And by the way, that book I'm talking about, the very first edition that was published in 1939, if you have an opportunity to get it, turn to the back cover. At the bottom of the back cover, the paragraph says, now listen to this is verbatim. The paragraph says, send the publisher $3.50. We're going to send you this book. We want you to keep it for 7 days. If you don't think the information in this book is helpful to you, send it back and we'll give you your money back. Think about that. That's the solution to alcoholism. They know that this stuff worked. They tested it among themselves. They were absolutely convinced that if you give yourself to this simple program, you can create a balanced life without alcohol. Not a perfect life, but a balanced one. So I'm asking John, I said, well, what is balanced? He said, balance means that when you mess up, you can figure out how to get out of your mess. Because ain't nobody's mess but yours. In the book, it says, Lee, most of your problems are of your own making. I said, well, how did my own make it? I don't drink no more. He said, son, you don't understand the depth and the power of your selfishness, your self-centeredness. You don't know the impact of all of what you do, how it affects other people. And I sure didn't. And again, because and before I got interested in learning, and it didn't make no difference because I don't drink, go to meeting, and I go to work on time and pay my bills and all of that stuff. So I'm figuring if I'm doing all of that stuff, I'm entitled to my way. I in turn don't drink, go to meetings into entitlement and could get royally pissed off when it don't work. Because now I need somebody to blame. That's alcoholism. I ain't drinking because I don't drink no more. So John is helping me kind of get through this thing, how to help it make sense to me. So after 7, the program, the people that created this recognized that they had harmed a lot of folk. And to free themselves of the guilt in a lot of those situations, the program says that we made a list of all the persons that we had harmed, and we came willing to do what? To make amends. Now, again, it took years for me to understand that because when I got there, I decided that I wasn't going to make a list of all the persons I had harmed. I was going to pick and choose. And I decided I wasn't going to pick my daughter's mother, and I wasn't going to pick my brother because of what they had done to me. So I ain't going to make no amends to them because what they had done, just as crazy as I can be. And I can't blame it on drinking because I don't drink no more. But I don't drink, and I come to these meetings, and I finally, ladies and gentlemen, you all woke up in me the willingness to try to learn, the willingness to try to apply. So while I didn't do it initially, it took years, but I finally did it. I was able to put their name and put the word Lewis and put the word Donita on my list. Those were the 2 people that I wasn't going to put, but I eventually put them there. So this program of recovery, and I don't know if any of you all have ever thought of this or not. Maybe you've heard the phrase, I'm going to take this to my grave. Well, Alcoholics Anonymous, the people that created this program, created a plan and a way that we can free ourselves and not have to carry guilt and shame the rest of our lives, not drinking to our grave. And I think that's what 6, 7, 8, and 9 really mean. This is how I got free of how I treated my daughter's mother, how I treated my mother, how I treated my brother, full of self-righteousness and anger and fear, all of that I couldn't understand at the time because I wasn't willing. It's an amazing thing how things changed for me once I became willing. So anyway, 9th step says, well, look, if you reach the 9th step clearly, you have made some spiritual progress. And that's what this is. This is progress. All right, say, but in your attempts to free yourself of the impact and the harm you cause other people, you need to use judgment, Lee. Well, I don't know what judgment means, so I messed around and went back to a lot of the people that I thought I had harmed, telling them how sorry I was. And every one of them agreed. My cousin, I went to my cousin married this guy, nice man, good dude. They had 5 kids together. And I used to go over his house and drink up his liquor. I was over there one of them times, and I decided to tell him that he needed to stop knocking my cousin up with all these daggone babies. Now, the man don't drink, got a job, work, take care of his family. But that liquor in me just had me saying hurtful things to people. Anyway, he put me out of his house, told me don't never come back. So my 9th step, I remembered some of what had exchanged between he and I. So I went back over there unannounced, gonna make this ninth step. So I said, look, his name was Punch. I said, Punch, I know you don't want me in your house, man. I'm standing at the door. I said, I know you don't want me in your house, man. I just came by to tell you that I'm in AA and I want to apologize for the way I talked to you. He said, I don't care what you in. I don't want to have nothing to do with you. Slammed the door. So I walked away, hurt, anger, say, well, dang, I'm trying to do the right thing. What's wrong with him? At the time, ladies and gentlemen, I had no idea what the word motive meant. Was I trying to do the right thing for the right reason? If when I do the right thing for the right reason, that's how I can tell by how I feel if I'm doing the right thing for the right reason. That's what it talks about in the fifth step when it says that we admitted to God and to ourselves, to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. Not the behavior, but the nature. John told me the nature is what makes you do what you did, Lee. That's the nature, the depth of your selfishness, of your lust. That's what makes you do what you do. So when I thought about that, and I wondered, well, I don't know how come he didn't respond to my gracious apology, all right? Because my motive wasn't pure. I wasn't trying to make amends. I was trying to get accolades, trying to get him to pat me on the back, tell me how proud he was or how happy he was. That's how I know when I'm not doing what AA says. I call it AA, but it's really what I want. And I can tell the difference because when I do it what I want, it doesn't work. Now, you would think at my age and stage, I would have learned that by now, but I haven't. But anyway, that's my experience, part of my experience with the ninth step. The other piece I'd like to share with you is with my brother. Ladies and gentlemen, my brother got in trouble when I was in high school. I came home from school one day and my mother's sitting in the dining room crying. And something had happened. And to this day, even though both of my parents have died, it was never talked about. But I do remember my dad saying, I didn't raise nobody to go to jail. I ain't raised nobody to get in trouble with the law. So if you go to jail, don't call me. I ain't got nothing to do with that. Well, whatever it is that my brother did, he ended up in prison. And that brought shame. The whole environment in the house changed. And it was a real weird experience. And they didn't talk about it. And it was one of my early traumas in my life. But I didn't know that's what it was. I didn't know what to do with it. And it was before I started drinking. But once I started drinking, it just covered up all that I'd been living with and not knowing what to do. And I'm saying all that to say that my brother got out of prison, went on and got a job, minded his business, got a family, all of that. And because of you all, I can't tell you when it was because he died, I think, in the early 80s. But before he died, I called him. I said, hey, man, I'd like to meet and talk with you. And he said, okay. And we met and we talked. And when I say we talked, I was able to tell him some of what I remembered my life was like because of my drinking and because of my involvement in AA. And ladies and gentlemen, I can't remember the words or the details, but he told me what happened in his life. And as a result of which I really did, I swear I felt good about being with him. Because when he, whatever it is he did, I felt abandoned, that he just abandoned me. My own selfishness, the fact that he was in prison. And I know he was in prison because my mother got one of her friends to go visit him one Sunday. And she made me swear not to tell my father. And I remember that we went to Lawton Penitentiary one time. And anyway, I want you to know that we talked about it. And then sometime later, my sister-in-law called and said he was in the hospital. My brother was in the hospital. And I went to visit him. And then he called me a couple of days later, asked me to bring him a pack of cigarettes. And I said, okay. And my sister-in-law said, well, he's dying of cancer. Why are you going to bring him a cigarette? Going to bring him cigarettes? I say, because he wanted a cigarette. The doctors, let me tell you how bad he was doing. After they examined him, they gave him some morphine and sent him home. Said, man, ain't nothing we can do. You go home and die. Ain't no point you dying in the hospital. Now, I'm describing that my way. Medically, they said it a whole different way. But anyway, what I want you to know is that he called me and asked me to do something for him. We were able to mend our relationship as brothers. And I got it when it happened. And it's not years later, I got it when it happened. And that's a reflection of listening to you all over the years. Ladies and gentlemen, in the preamble, it talks about sharing our experience. And as a result of our experience, we gain strength. And if you don't know what strength means, let me tell you that not drinking and coming to meetings, you're going to hear from us that the events in life that happen, and oftentimes they're very hurtful and very painful, but we don't drink. We don't drink. I don't care what happens, we don't drink. Now, that's not true for all of us. But for those of us that give ourselves to this simple program, we learn from one another how to get through pain, how to get through grief, how to get through sorrow, how to get through hurt without drinking. So when you hear our experience, strength, and hope, we hope that if you knew, and none of this makes any sense to you, I hope that what you see on the screen will be enough for you to want to come back and sit with us again. So now the program, 10 Steps, says, well, okay, Lee, you've done some really good things in your life, but you're still vulnerable, you're still susceptible to your anger and your selfishness. And what I want you to do, the way the program's structured, so what I want you to do is when you're wrong, own it. Own it. That's all. Well, I'm still wrong because I cuss people out when I'm driving. And I have my little temper tantrums when I can't have my way. And when I say that, I mean sometimes I get real quiet because I'm hurt because things ain't working the way I want them to. So instead of saying something mean and vulgar, I won't say anything at all. And I'm learning how to look at the impact of what I do and how I do it has on other people. So the 10th step says, well, when you're wrong, own it promptly. Now, it doesn't say change it promptly. It says own it. When we are wrong, promptly admit it. And I can do that. I do that, I think, very well. So now that I've admitted I'm wrong, what do I do with that? I've admitted it promptly. Now what? The 11th step says, well, why don't you try prayer meditation? Why don't you go to the one that has all power and ask? And ask. We sought through prayer and meditation to do what? To improve. To improve what? To improve our consciousness. So I do. I don't do it all the time. I can't say honestly that I do it often, but I do it. That's how I know that this thing works. So it's let me end with this, close up with this. The people that created this, Bill Wilson says, now that we got it, how can we get it to those that need it? Ladies and gentlemen, the men and women on this screen, that is who his vision. He was a visionary. They had it. They didn't have to share it. But Bill was committed through God's grace. Now that we got it, now that we're trying to get it, now that we think we got it, they got it. And they wrote it out for us. And the last part of this says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message. Well, what's the message? For me, the message is I know some folk. I hang with some folk now, and I listen to people differently than I did before. And I like the quality of my life, and I like the people in it. Yeah, I do. I got people in my life, not only do I love, but I trust. And those are two different emotional elements that I hadn't really considered before. Now, do I practice this in all my affairs? I'm not sure. Sometimes I'm more conscious of it than others. Sometimes I'm more conscious of it than others. But in closing, for those that identify themselves as new or relatively new, I'd like to leave you with this. Having been here 48 years, 2 months, and 30 some days. Yeah, 30, yeah. Having been here all this time, if you're new, then you might want to ask yourself, well, gee whiz, the AA work. Why he here all this time? Why does he keep coming? Well, I'm going to leave you with what Dr. Pop says, because that's Gabe told me I had to tell you all this. Having nothing to do with drinking, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here this afternoon, one, because I was invited, two, out of a sense of duty, three, is I enjoy the pleasure of your company. I am just as happy to see y'all. And I don't know, but two of y'all on the screen. Carl has become a loyal friend of mine from Florida. I know Gabe and Rashid. I'm just meeting the rest of y'all. And other than the guy that invited me, none of y'all knew I was coming, but I knew y'all was going to be here. Just think about that. And then Dr. Bob went on to say that being here today puts insurance on my sobriety today, Wednesday. And then lastly, ladies and gentlemen, he said, somebody was here for me when I got here. Ladies and gentlemen, I got here on Saturday morning, March the 5th, 1976, and somebody was here for me when I got here. And that's the sense of duty and pleasure I feel for being with you all this afternoon. I want to thank you for the opportunity and turn it back over to Amy from Greeneville. Thank you.